The moment stunned everyone as Khabib Nurmagomedov, known for his ruthless precision in the ring, showed the world that true power lies in calm, measured silence. Trust us, you won't believe how he handled this insult. Stay as we walk you through this unforgettable encounter that will remind you why true strength lies not in power or status, but in standing up for those who need it most. You won't believe Khabib's answer. It's something that will stay with you long after you hear this story. If you like stories that inspire and touch you, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to see even more powerful content. It was Friday night, a time when millions of viewers around the world were tuning in to watch one of the most popular talk shows on television. The air was electrified with excitement as the host, known for his wit and bold humor, was about to introduce his guest. He is no stranger to controversy, often pushing the boundaries of what is allowed with his jokes, and this evening would be no exception. The set was designed to feel relaxed and casual, with bright lights casting a warm glow on guests and audience alike, creating an atmosphere that was meant to put everyone at ease. Little did anyone know that this particular evening would unfold, and no one could have foreseen. The guest on today's show was none other than Khabib Nurmagomedov, an undefeated MMA legend who recently retired from the sport at the peak of his career. Khabib's legacy in the octagon has been unrivaled, with an impeccable record that has made him one of the most respected fighters in the world. But it wasn't just his fighting skills that made him a household name. Khabib was known for his humble demeanor, his unwavering discipline, and his deep sense of respect for his culture and traditions. His quiet strength and steadfast character made him an object of admiration for many, fans and fighters alike. When Khabib took the stage, the audience erupted in applause. The cheers were not just for his fighting achievements, they were a testament to the respect he has earned in every corner of the world. Despite his legendary status, Khabib has never sought attention. He preferred to stay out of the media hype, letting his actions speak for themselves rather than surrendering to the public spotlight. His presence on the show was a rare occasion, and it was clear that both the host and the audience were excited to hear from a man who has become an icon not only for his success in the ring, but also for his genuine humility and discipline outside of it. The host, eager to break the ice, greeted Khabib with a warm handshake and a wide smile. He was known for his sharp humor and playful teasing, often using light-hearted jokes to put his guests at ease. Khabib, as always, greeted his host with a polite nod and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was calm and collected, a man of few words, preferring to let his presence speak for itself. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, but Khabib's calm demeanor made it clear that he was here on his own terms, not embarrassed by the glitz and glamour of the television world. The host, sensing an opportunity to have a little fun, leaned in with a playful smirk. "So, Khabib," he began. His voice was teasing but light. "You're famous for your dominance in the ring, but what about behind his limits? I have to ask, how does someone like you handle all this fame and attention? You're pretty serious, aren't you? Do you ever smile?" The crowd laughed, thinking it was a harmless joke, but the announcer wasn't done yet. He could feel the tension in the air, and instead of letting it pass, he continued, thinking Khabib might play along. "Honestly, Khabib, you're the most serious guy I've ever met. You're the only guy who can make silence look intimidating. What's the matter? Do you ever relax?" As the announcer continued, the energy in the room began to change slightly. Although Khabib's face remained impenetrable, the audience could sense that this was not the kind of humor that Khabib usually enjoyed. It was clear that the host was pushing the boundaries of his usual jokes, and the crowd, sensing the change in tone, quieted down a bit. The playful atmosphere was beginning to seem more tense, and the presenter, not noticing the change, continued to press onward. "Maybe it's time to show a little more personality, huh?" joked the host. "You're a great fighter, but you're the kind of guy who can probably make a rock look charismatic. Have you ever thought about being a little more lively? Spice things up a little bit? The audience, sensing the growing discomfort, exchanged anxious glances. It was becoming clear that the host's attempts to tease Khabib's serious demeanor were beginning to cross the line, but the host, still confident in his approach, was not ready to stop. Now he was on the horse, and Khabib, whose stalwart nature rarely failed, remained silent, apparently indifferent to the jokes. The presenter, now enthusiastic, decided to go even. "Speaking of your career," he said with a smirk, "you retired at the height of your success, right? I mean, I understand. You left undefeated. But don't you think you left too soon? Afraid of losing one day? You know, Khabib, sometimes champions stay a little bit longer to prove that they don't just want to come out on top, but to show that they can hold the throne. But maybe you were just afraid to face real competitors. That's what I'm thinking." At this point, the presenter's tone changed from playful teasing to something harsher, and as he continued to joke, the crowd began to feel the discomfort that was beginning to build up in the room. Khabib had been silent the whole time. The expression on his face was impenetrable, but the tension in the air was undeniable. What would Khabib do? Would he laugh, or would he respond in a way no one expected? The host hadn't realized it yet, but at that moment he had crossed the line. The situation was about to change, and Khabib's response would be one that no one would ever forget. The presenter, still not realizing the seriousness of his words, leaned back in his chair, obviously feeling the rush of attention from the audience. He smiled, thinking that his jokes had achieved their purpose, thinking that he had defused the situation, but now something was different. The room had become quieter. The once cheerful atmosphere was now full of tension. The audience, who had laughed at first, gradually began to sense that Khabib's silence was not the easy, dismissive silence of someone who didn't care. It was a silence that demanded respect, a silence that hung in air like a challenge. Khabib, still sitting with his arms folded, his face as stoic as ever, remained completely unfazed by the host's increasingly harsh remarks. He did not flinch, he did not smile, and, most remarkably, he did not respond. But while the announcer thought he was in control of the situation, the truth was that Khabib was simply assessing his reaction. His calm demeanor was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of absolute equanimity. He wasn't going to let the host's insults provoke him into a hasty reaction. Instead, Khabib understood the situation all too well. It was a moment of choice that would define the narrative. The host, sensing that Khabib wasn't playing along, decided to step up his insults. "You know, Khabib," the announcer continued with a strained chuckle, "everybody says you're the best, but don't you think it's a little convenient that you walked away undefeated? I mean, you left when you were at the top, right? No one could ever beat you, but maybe the truth is that you were just afraid of losing. Afraid of what might happen if you went out for one more fight and didn't come out on top. Was that the case? You quit because you knew you couldn't stay undefeated forever, right?" The presenter's voice was louder now. His confidence was growing as he thought he was hitting all the right notes. The crowd, still silent, exchanged awkward glances. The humor disappeared, replaced by something more disturbing. But the announcer continued, oblivious to the growing tension inside Khabib. "You say you retired for your family, that it was your time," the host continued, now fully immersed in his line of questioning. "But do you think fans believe that? Do you think people believe it was really about leaving on your terms or avoiding that one defeat that would shatter the mystique? After all, Khabib, even the greatest have days when they meet someone who can bring them down. But you didn't want to take that risk, did you?" The host's voice took on a more mocking tone, one that often elicited laughter, but today it felt like an attack. He was so focused on getting Khabib to react that he didn't realize how wrong he was. Khabib, who had trained for years in the harshest conditions and fought the best in the world, was not the type to be embarrassed by a couple of insulting words, but the presenter, not realizing the true strength of the man in front of him, continued on, thinking he was still in control of the narrative. "Listen," the host said with a smirk, "I get it. You didn't want to ruin your spotless, but don't you think you let fear dictate your decision? No, when you walk away undefeated, everyone remembers the victories. But the moment you lose, even once, it's a different story." So, Khabib, was it fear that made you walk away, or just the realization that no one could beat you and you didn't want to take the risk? The audience squirmed uncomfortably in their seats. There was no more laughter or light-hearted banter. The tension was palpable. Each word of the presenter seemed to bring Khabib closer to the edge, but Khabib sat motionless, his expression unchanged. His eyes were fixed on the presenter, who had idea that with every word he was pushing Khabib into a corner. And then, without warning, Khabib spoke. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a heaviness in it that made the host freeze in place. "You think I'm afraid of losing?" asked Khabib. His eyes squinted slightly, but his tone didn't rise with anger. "You think I left because I was afraid of what might happen in the future? You're wrong. I left because I knew exactly what I had accomplished. I left because I had nothing more to prove. There's no fear in that. You talk about losing, but I didn't need to keep fighting to prove anything to anyone. I left because I had fulfilled my purpose. My journey was complete." The presenter was caught for the first time. Khabib didn't just speak words, he spoke from a position of deep understanding. As a man who has made conscious, deliberate choices about his life and career, Khabib's words weren't about defending himself from blame. They were about standing firm on his truth. Khabib continued. His gaze was unwavering. "You talk about my career as if I owe something to be afraid. I'm not afraid of losing, and I'm not afraid of what others will think. I resigned when I realized it was time. I chose to retire because I kept my promises, because I lived my life with honor, and kept my word to my family, my team, and myself. You want to joke about it, but it's the truth." At that moment, the presenter realized that he had crossed the line, and the atmosphere in the studio changed. Khabib's calm, reserved response revealed a weakness in the presenter's attempt to provoke him. The host wanted to mock Khabib's decision, to question his legacy with cruel jokes and assumptions. But instead, Khabib used his silence and his words demonstrate his true strength. There was no anger or outburst, just the quiet strength of a man who has earned the right to make his own decisions. The master, who had been so confident only moments before, was now unsure how to proceed. His playful teasing had failed, replaced by a humbling realization. Khabib wasn't just a fighter. He was a man of honor and integrity, one whose strength came not from his fists, but from his ability to stand upright in the face of adversity, and from his unwavering conviction that he had done what he to do. The crowd, which had been silent during Khabib's response, began to move, realizing the profound wisdom of his words. What started as a moment of playful humor turned into a lesson in respect, dignity, and the power of knowing when to walk away. The host, caught off guard by Khabib's calm but forceful answer, took a moment to realize the change in the atmosphere. His usual confident smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of realization. The playful energy that had once defined the show now seemed to have dissipated, leaving an undeniable sense of respect hanging in the air. Onlookers who had been eagerly awaiting Khabib's response were equally stunned. They expected a reaction filled with defense, or perhaps anger, but instead they witnessed a man who was so confident that even the harshest of insults could not embarrass him. For a few seconds the presenter struggled to find the right words. His usual bravado was failing. He thought he could get away with ridiculing Khabib, expecting the fighter to either brush it off or dismiss it. But what he had just encountered was far more powerful than he had expected, a quiet, unrelenting force that came from a place of deep conviction. It was a moment that stunned him and silenced him. He had unconsciously underestimated Khabib's character, thinking that a few caustic jokes about his retirement would elicit laughter, or maybe even defense. What he hadn't counted on was meeting a man whose sense of honor was so unshakable that it cut through superficial humor with the force of a sharp blade. Khabib's response wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a quiet challenge to the presenter's assumptions. Speaking with such calm confidence, Khabib turned the situation around, leaving the presenter not only without an immediate response, but also reflecting on his own words. The audience, now fully aware of the seriousness of the situation, shifted their attention from the announcer to Khabib. In this brief exchange of remarks, Khabib proved that true strength lies in keeping his composure, even when provoked. He didn't need to raise his voice or get angry. Instead, he simply spoke his truth, and that truth was enough to command respect. The presenter, realizing the gaffe, tried to recover, but it was clear that the moment was lost. I know what you mean, Khabib, he said. His tone softened noticeably. I guess I didn't quite understand the gravity of your decision. It's clear now that you made the right choice for you, and I respect that. The words sounded hesitant, as if the presenter was trying to salvage some sense of dignity, but there was no denying the change in atmosphere. The audience, sensing the authenticity of Khabib's words, couldn't help but feel a deep admiration for him. What started out as Khabib's test of patience turned into a reminder of the true meaning of strength and integrity. Khabib, always a reserved man, seemed to hold no ill will. He nodded slightly, acknowledging his master's attempt to come to his, but his gaze did not waver. It's okay, Khabib said simply. His voice was still calm, but there was a quiet wisdom in it now. Sometimes people forget that strength is not in fighting, but in knowing when to stand firm and when to retreat. A long pause followed before the presenter finally found his voice again. Well, Khabib, I'm sure all the viewers learned something from that. I know I learned. The host looked around. The audience was now fully engaged, clearly respecting Khabib more than before. It's not every day someone teaches you a lesson on this stage. The host's words were sincere, and the room was filled with unspoken recognition of Khabib's power. It was longer just about physical strength. It was about strength of character, values, and the right approach. Khabib's ability to rise above the host's provocations, to turn the situation into a reflection of his personal integrity, left an indelible mark on everyone present. In that moment, Khabib accomplished something much more than just silencing the interviewer. He turned the situation around, not through confrontation or anger, but through the quiet, unwavering strength of his own convictions. He proved that his retirement was not an act of fear or cowardice, as the presenter suggested, but an act of self-awareness, discipline, and a deep sense of purpose. Khabib didn't just win the moment, he redefined it. The host, now realizing the full significance of his previous words, smiled nervously. You know, Khabib, you're really something. I think we can go with, it's safe to say that the world has a lot more respect for you than I thought. Khabib nodded. His face remained calm. Respect is earned, not given, he said quietly. And with these few words, Khabib not only won the respect of his host, but also confirmed the strength of his character in the eyes of all those watching. The tension in the hall began to subside when the audience, now overwhelmed with admiration for Khabib's restrained response, began to applaud. It was a moment of undeniable respect, a moment that will remain with the host, the audience, and all who witnessed it. Khabib's unexpected response showed that true strength is not in proving others wrong, but in staying true to your principles despite provocation, despite provocation, despite provocation.